Persona 4 is a game that, more so than any other, makes me think of my childhood. There we go, that sounds appropriately homosexual for a video essay opening. Nah, but whenever I think of this game, it always does manage to remind me of simpler times. I'm sure part of it is just the inherent nostalgia of these things, memories of playing my battered old PS Vita late into the night, going through the story at a steady pace. I've got to have played it maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, but my first experience with it, my first experience with any Persona entry, was something really special. Going back and looking over it in a more objective manner, 2 and 3 are definitely the better games, but there's just something about 4 that is just so cozy to me, even to this day. Maybe it's the yellow colour scheme that gives everything a sort of warm, peppy vibe. Maybe it's the music, which feels a lot more happy-go-lucky and energetic than the hip-hop funk of 3 and noir jazz of 5. Maybe it is just my association of it with happier times. But then again, I played 3 for the first time not long after 4, and it holds similar nostalgic value for me, yet it's not quite the same. While its setting of Tatsumi Port Island is less of a shithole than the humble town of Inaba, there's something about the latter that really speaks to me. It could be the sense of community spirit. I live in the cities nowadays, but I grew up in the country and can really relate to that small, sleepy town atmosphere. There's not much to do, and it's not really what I'd call an exciting place to live, but there's a sort of camaraderie that you can find in these towns. The whole game, hell, really the entirety of the new Persona saga in general, is about being an outsider and making connections to a new, unfamiliar place until sooner or later, it's like you've always lived there. It becomes routine. Go to school in the morning, have lunch, get through your lessons, then the rest of the day is yours to do as you please, whether you work your job, hang out with your mates, or go inside the television to fight shadow monsters and stop a demented serial killer. You know, typical teenager stuff. Then, you head home, have dinner with the family, maybe study in the evening unless you're me, and head to bed. Rinse and repeat the next day. The Persona games do a really good job of representing the daily grind without getting monotonous. For the most part. Actually, in 4 in particular, I tend to enjoy the daily grind more so than the forced story aspects. Improving social stats, increasing social links, leveling up in dungeons. The freedom it gives you really helps to emphasise the feel of being a kid balancing out the stresses of daily life. But how does this tie into Inaba itself? Well, as I alluded to earlier, the feeling of the daily grind really starts to build up a connection to the town, especially given that it's only marginally bigger than Tatsumi Port Island in 3 and way smaller than Shibuya in 5. You learn every location like it's the back of your hand. You figure out what characters like to hang out at certain spots. The music becomes an old familiar friend, welcoming you to the town once more. Until around the 3rd act of the game, when all of that stops. To back up a bit, all throughout Persona 4, the imagery of fog is key. The rain, and the resulting fog, is used as an indicator of when people are going to start turning up dead, or when they would if it wasn't for our Scooby-Doo gang saving them. And after almost every rescue, we're greeted to a short cutscene of our killer hanging out in the midst of the fog, being mopey because Five Guys is closed. It ties very nicely into the game's central themes of seeking the truth and finding what hides beneath the surface. The fog in turn obscures the reality. Our protagonists have to wear special glasses to even see through it in the shadow world. You really have to struggle to see through fog, just like how our gang has to fight against all manner of bloated weirdos to find the truth behind the murders. But then the game's final, proper dungeon comes along, and this script is totally flipped on its head. As our killer, and my husband, Adachi, flees further into the shadow world to evade our heroes, the real world starts to break down as the shadows leak in. The fog completely blocks out the sun, thrusting the world into this putrid, sickening hue, far removed from the bright, expressive yellows we've seen throughout most of the game. Everyone you talk to is gloomy, depressed. Aside from Mustard from My Hero Academia, he's in a pretty good mood. It's similar to the apathy syndrome seen in Persona 3, except in this case, the misery isn't brought on by any supernatural means. People are coughing on the thick smog, suffocating. It's only marginally better than the average day in LA. It's borderline apocalyptic, appropriately enough for an SMT spin-off. It's even worth noting that the protagonist's glasses allow for him to see through the fog much easier, so what the world actually looks like at this stage is left up to one's imagination, and, as we all know, There's nothing scarier than the machinations of the human mind. The music. The music, man. Persona 4's exploration tracks make me want to go bowling or fishing, go shopping or shoot the breeze with my mates. But the track that settles in during this segment. I would fucking kill myself if I heard this in real life while walking home from work. We're in Yasuo Inaba, not fucking Silent Hill or like Lurgan or something. Cool your jets, lads. What happened to Heartbeat Heartbreak? See, this is what happens when Adachi isn't around. The man was holding the entire time together and we didn't even realise it. Then we get home after wading through the intestinal tract of Yuri Andropov and... well, it's marginally better. At least the music doesn't sound like the inside of Yoko Ono's soul anymore, but I mean, it's not a massive improvement. Cousin Nanako is still in the hospital after Jeremy Corbyn kidnapped her, and Uncle Dojima is with her the majority of the time, so we're left totally alone in the home. The music is less haunting, more so melancholy, but man, it's not really an upgrade. For the last 60-70 hours of playtime, this place has been my home. It's been full of warmth, even during the tense and awkward moments. Even when Dojima was out late at work, it always felt like a home, always a safe space from the onslaught of the events throughout. Now, all that's left are ghosts of the past, faint memories of what I had taken for granted this whole time. And that is why I think Persona 4's use of horror is so magical. It isn't a horror game, it isn't a constant barrage of misery and self-flagellating revenge porn. You know, we're fighting shadow creatures and flamboyant home gamers, and we have a cartoon bear working with us, and we get to look at underage girls in swimsuits.
Good. Why don't you have a seat right over there? Oh no! Give it! Oh no!
It's like the epitome of a schlocky summer anime, the kind of thing you get recommended by your weirdo roommate in university who can't quite fit through doorways with ease and has a weirdly close haircut. But as stupid as it all is, it becomes endearing in a way. My recollections of traversing Inaba became fond memories. The game executes its horror elements by perverting those fond memories. The state of Inaba is even more heart-wrenching, because we've already seen it at what I will charitably call its best. And to be honest, you never really get to experience those memories again. There are a couple of weeks of playtime after Adachi is defeated, and if you smell weird and go for the golden ending, you get an extra semester to screw around in. But for the base game, we almost never really get to experience the way things were again. It really makes you feel like you're at the end of the line, that everything you hold dear is being ripped away from you. I think it's saying something that being in the distorted hellscape that is Adachi's dungeon is actually a more comfortable experience than hanging around Inaba. I mean, at least this place actually has some groove and gets my blood pumping again. Ooh, if I knew disconnecting from reality was this jamming, I would have stopped taking my meds long ago. The darker atmosphere of this section of the game even reflects in the game overs. Yeah, I should probably mention that Personas 4 and 5 have quite a few pseudo-bad endings that occur if you miss the deadline for completing the dungeons. I wouldn't really call them bad endings per se, since it just sets you back about a week or so to do it properly this time, but they're a neat detail, and the fact that they even exist, instead of some stock game over screen, really shows the effort and care that went into crafting these games. 5 in particular has some really gnarly ones, like when it's implied one of the gang gets sold into the slave trade or this bitch kills herself. Not much of a loss, really. But most of 4's are fairly benign, just saying that the body of the person you were supposed to rescue was found. Oops. The one that is slightly different, however, is the one for Adachi's dungeon. Yeah, it's pretty metal. For a game that's so happy-go-lucky most of the time, it's really unsettling to actually have one of the main cast get torn to pieces by shadows after everything they've been through. And honestly, that kind of sums up why I find it so effective in a nutshell. 4 is so happy for the most part, that the grim moments really stand out. 3 has a similar apocalyptic feel in the final few months, but it doesn't shake me as much because the game is fairly downbeat all around. We've had party members die, our gang has gone through immense trauma, there have been signs of apathy syndrome all throughout the game, but while going to shit kind of feels like a logical endpoint. Same goes for 5, which is pretty consistent in its edginess, so people getting raped and killing themselves isn't really that out of left field when it happens. I'm not shitting on these games, by the way. I like them a lot. Well, mostly. But the way 4 handles its bleakest moments managed to get under my skin way more because of how shocking it is, because it spends a whole game building up the happiest murder mystery plot the world has seen. I think the art style also helps a lot with this for me. It carries over a similar look to Persona 3, where all of the characters kind of look like porcelain dolls, and the majority of the locations in the game rely on fixed camera angles. Don't get me wrong, the art style of 5 and the remakes is objectively superior, with proportions that actually fit the character portraits, and models that actually show emotion aside from looping the same stock animations like they're autistic. But while it was clearly born of limitations, the art style in 3 and 4 really adds to the uncanny nature of the game's darkest moments, especially with 4. With the design of the buildings and sort of rundown feeling of the town, it really evokes that Japanese horror feel when cloaked in fog. Like, this is the kind of art direction I could see Sako Sanabashi having. I've spent the past however long yapping about how this section of the game really evokes the horror atmosphere. But honestly, it manages to achieve that even before Adachi is exposed, with the game's proper bad ending. Yeah, I talked a bit about the game overs earlier, but this game has a couple of actual bad endings, and while I could make a video on all of them themselves, I want to talk about the main one and the easiest one to get, which coincidentally serves as one of the most sensically bleak moments in the entire game. So here's the deal. Before Adachi is revealed as the real bad guy, this guy, Jeremy Corbyn. Oh, sorry, it's Namatame, my bad. Yeah, now that I think about it, I don't think Jem has the physical strength to abduct a child. Anyway, disgraced politician Namatame has kidnapped cousin Nanako, but we managed to catch him. Both he and Nanako are taken to the same hospital. Huh, I wonder who arranged that. And the situation looks grim, with the girl barely clinging to life. In fact, for a brief period of time, she slips. Her heart rate goes. Nanako is dead. So, what would you do if your beloved cousin, someone who kept you grounded throughout the crazy events of the last year, passed away slowly and painfully? Personally, I would start grabbing the good silverware while everyone's too busy grieving to notice. But the protagonist is of a different persuasion, and he and the gang head to Namatame's room after Adachi accidentally lets his location slip. I wonder fucking why. Reaching Namatame's room, the situation is tense. There's a convenient television right in his room, and half of the team are all for throwing him in, since spending prolonged periods of time in the TV's shadow world will result in death. We're planning to kill this dude, and it gives us the only time when dialogue options really matter. Pick the wrong choices, and...
About you guys. Remember, there's no need to stay if you don't want to.
I'll stay. Me too. I won't be the only one to walk out on this. I'd only suffer more that way. If this is what we've decided, I'll stick with it to the end.
Me too. No matter how we end it, I want to witness it.
We finally crossed the line. We had come so close to the truth, and yet our rage blinded us at one of the final hurdles. It doesn't mean anything. Nanako is still dead, the fog still remains, Teddy's fucked off to go and do whatever. the true killer is still out there. Nice try, retard. Yeah, personally, I find 3's bad ending more haunting. Again, maybe I'll talk about that another time. But this little finale is a great example of how Persona 4 twists and perverts the game's previous themes and aesthetic. It's one of the few times where I'd say a bad ending is easy to get in a Persona game without it being blatantly signposted that you're making a bad decision. The whole game is about chasing the truth and thinking critically about a ridiculous situation, and finally, you're told to try and do that without any hand-holding from the other characters or the plot. Failing doesn't just mean a bad ending, it means that you fundamentally failed to learn what the game has hammered into you up to that point. Most other bad endings in the series, including the other bad endings in 4, are so obviously wrong that anyone who picks them would clearly be doing so for the sake of curiosity. This is different. This is your retribution for not heeding the game's lessons. The wacky cast of characters are twisted, having committed an outright atrocity in a manner that doesn't even bring them closer to the truth. All throughout the game, we're shown the beauty of hunting the truth, how it can bring meaning to life, pull you back from the brink. Even if it's uncomfortable or painful to face, it will inevitably be worth it in the end. Only in this ending do we see the depth of the consequences of blinding oneself to the truth. And that, in a nutshell, is why Persona 4's horror is so effective to me. It completely flips the light-hearted themes and aesthetics on its head, and shatters everything the players loved about the game up to that point. Well, aside from the battle music, I guess. There's a reason why games like Doki Doki Literature Club became so popular, and it's not just because of Kuma's. Hiding horror beneath a veil of bubbly positivity is, to me, one of the most effective ways to scare. And in its final proper dungeon, Persona 4 is able to utilize that gloriously. Sorry, who the fuck watches this shit?